So you worked at Amazon.
It was just an absolutely incredible place. They were paying me very well. I was 33. Groupon had acqui-hired my first company. I was running the world's largest spam operation.
Do you have a family?
Yes, 14-month-old daughter and twins who had just been born.
And you decide to quit your corporate job and start something completely new.
I guess there has not been a startup in aviation for a century. There is opportunity and we have to take advantage of it quickly enough. We raised $150 million from some of the most amazing investors, Paul Graham, Sam Altman, Y Combinator, Bessemer, Michael Moritz, Reid Hoffman, all of those people put in at least $10 million. The world is very open to Supersonic right now. Now we've got runway, and then we broke the sound barrier, and it was 24 hours from breaking the sound barrier to being in the West Wing of the White House.
Can you give advice to someone who's stuck with their idea of building a boom-sized company, but they just can't take the leap of faith? They have a family.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited about this conversation because you did something a lot of people are dreaming of, but they don't have enough courage. And I wanted to focus this conversation on basically how you changed your mindset and went from a corporate job at Amazon to building the next generation airline. So you worked at Amazon, right? You were a tech guy for 13 years?
I was at Amazon for about 5, and then another startup, and then a startup I founded, and then that got acqui-hired by Groupon. But so yeah, I was bopping around tech for 14 years. I started my first company in my parents' basement in high school, and I always just wanted to go where the most interesting stuff was happening and build something new. It was one of the things that was sort of a mind fuck for me is I didn't see myself as radically different. And the decision, I remember really struggling with the decision to start Boom. And it was this is if by going and starting a supersonic jet company, I'm almost telling the world that I'm different. Because if it succeeds, it will by definition be historic. And I'm who am I to do this? I don't have the resume for this. And then the way I kind of got my mind around it was a couple things. One was I was very inspired by that 1997 Apple ad campaign, where the tagline was the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And it's really true. And then I thought of Bill Gates, who had started Microsoft in the 70s and had set a goal of putting a computer in every home and on every desk running Microsoft software. And it was the time he said that was absurd. And yet he did it. And I was wow, okay. So people have to be willing to declare big things in order for the big things to actually happen. And the ones who try and succeed, we know who they are. History knows their names. It's the Wright brothers, who were bicycle entrepreneurs turned inventor of literally the airplane.
Yeah.
Jobs, Gates, everyone else we know at that level. And there's probably also a dark matter of entrepreneurs. The people who tried and they didn't succeed.
Exactly. And we don't hear about those.
We don't hear about them. And I'm okay, really my choice is do I want to be in that category if I fail? Or would I rather be in the category of people who didn't try? And once I saw it that way, I was I'd rather be in the dark matter of entrepreneurs than in the didn't try.
Did you have an opportunity to work with Jeff Bezos directly?
I did a little bit. I was approximately engineer number 200. So it was after IPO. The place was established. I think I got in 2 weeks before the .com hiring freeze. Oh. So the bubble was imploding as I was rushing in the door. And yeah, I was something like engineer number 200. And the Amazon, I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was just an absolutely incredible place. And everyone worked hard. There was more important stuff to be done than people to do it, which makes it very apolitical. There's no one's competing for what work and projects. So projects are sitting on the floor, and if you want to do one, just pick it up and just do it. And so I got to work on something that Jeff cared about, just because I was excited about it and did it. And it was basically doing Amazon's first ad buy from Google. It was 2003. So it wasn't obvious that web search was going to be important. It wasn't obvious that search engine marketing was going to be important. And we ended up building this thing that was the first automated ad management system on the internet. At one time, I think it was responsible at the same time for 7% of Amazon's revenue.
Wow.
And 7% of Google's revenue.
Wow.
And it was just I managed to strap my, I sort of visualize it as I'm standing next to a rocket and my like jacket like gets caught on the rocket and the rocket launches and I'm like up there with the rocket, like kind of hanging on, like, wow, can I, and I like, so like Jeff cared, it got a lot of visibility in Amazon. And I always felt like I was just like an inch from screwing it up enough that they would fire me and put somebody who actually knew what they were doing in charge of it.
What was your key learning? Look, you did this amazing project with Jeff.
I mean, there's like a bunch of key learnings out of it. I mean, like one was sort of the experience, reflecting back on it many years later, the experience of looking at a space, everyone's doing it one way. So back then, search engine marketing, it was all done by hand. Like people would choose their keywords, write their ads, and so they could only have a few keywords and only a few ads. And Amazon had millions of products. But like most of the competitors would they'd buy like the keyword like camera or like cell phone, and those would be like bid up with tons of ads on them. But there were 300 million unique searches per month. Most of them had no ads. I was like, oh, we should just ignore the popular things. We'll buy all the rest of them. We'll do it with automation. And so at the meta level, it was this experience of like looking at a space. Everyone's doing it one way. There's actually a completely different way. Let's go do that. And then we actually made it work. And I hadn't really had this thought until right now, but probably that like ticked something in me of like, okay, we can go look at a space, think differently about it than everyone else has ever done, and like make something successful.
When I was preparing for this interview, I jumped on a call with the CMO of Boom, and I was fascinated by the strategic approach they used to build the company. She told me that before they actually designed the passenger seats, they researched what their target audience might like, what type of seats they prefer, what type of service they prefer, and only then they build the product, the airline. And this customer-first approach should be the foundation for every company's product strategy. If you understand how important marketing is, you will find this report by HubSpot very interesting. It's HubSpot's newly released marketing strategy report for 2025. It unveils cutting-edge trends, powerful tools, and proven strategies that will boost your 2025 marketing approach and help you stay ahead in an AI-first world. They interviewed over 1,200 marketing leaders across North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia, and this report offers practical strategies for seamlessly integrating AI tools into your marketing workflow, data-backed approaches to ensure success in both B2B and B2C marketing, actionable steps for building content-driven, social-first strategies that resonate with your audience. It's not enough to just keep up with the AI in marketing. You need to lead it. Download the report now and turn these cutting-edge insights into immediate results for your marketing efforts. It's absolutely free. Link in the description below. Do you remember that day when you woke up and you thought like, I want to take this leap and build an airline?
Oh yeah, a couple of threads that connected up to it. Like one was I'd seen a Concorde in a museum in my 20s and I'd set a lifetime goal of flying supersonic and I put a Google alert on it. That was like one thread. Like another thread was every time I would get on an airplane, I would ask, what would this be like if somebody like Johnny Ive had designed it, not like whoever actually did it Boeing? And so that would like rattle around my head. And I sort of had in my head like, oh, I want to become an internet billionaire and then start an aviation company. And then the first part never happened. And so I had this thing on my to-do list that was like, figure out how to start an aerospace company. And like nothing happened with it for 10 years. And eventually, Groupon had like acqui-hired my first company. I was running like the world's largest like spam operation. And it was just so demoralizing. And they were paying me very well. And I was like saving up money. In my head, I was saving up money to buy myself an airplane. And at some point I'm like, it's not worth staying here longer for the airplane to be better. I'm just going to fire myself and like go do something else.
How old were you?
I was 33.
33. Did you have a family back then or?
I had yes. I think I had a 14-month-old daughter and like twins who had just been born.
And you decide to quit your corporate job and start something completely new.
I guess.
Were you scared? Like for me, I have a three-year-old and a 5-year-old for us with my husband to like change our lives completely. Just unimaginable right now.
It didn't feel so crazy to me at the time. My then wife was like, well, okay, honey, you've got a year to screw around with this jet thing.
Oh, she gave you
and then I expect you to get a job.
Yeah.
But I'd saved up enough money that I think this is actually important. I had saved up enough money in my head. I'd budgeted for 2 failed startups. It was like I could like start one, seed it with a little bit of money, fail, start another one, seed it with a little money, and fail before I'd actually have to get a job.
But it's also about time, right? It's not just about money because at a startup, you work like, 20 hours a day?
Maybe 28 some days.
Yeah, but like how do you manage that with kids? Do you regret like missing that time when they were so young, or you were able to?
I mean, I struggled with it, for sure. And in some ways, I was a very reluctant father back then. And then, along the way, I got divorced, and it actually made me a better father. It was like I realized, like, when I only have the kids half the time, and when I have them, I want to be really present.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not like the situation I ever would have designed, but it probably actually made me a better father and a better CEO. And it sort of forced just getting efficient. Like, okay, I'm not going to be the dad that spends the most time, but the time I spend better be good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you decided to start an airline company with no formal education in aerospace engineering whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through this mindset where you're like, yeah, I can just learn it by myself?
Again, I think it mattered that I sort of given myself a year to wander around. And, I sort of thought, okay, supersonic jets would obviously be great. No one's doing it. Conventional wisdom says that means there's something wrong with the idea. Like, you get told that in Silicon Valley all the time. If your idea is any good, there are 3 or 4 teams already working on it. And by the way, it's total bullshit. It's terrible advice. Terrible advice.
It's great to hear that.
What happened? What that does is it creates a herd mentality. On one hand, it's like, oh, like, there's a zillion people building ChatGPT wrappers. Back in the day, there were a zillion people building photo sharing apps. And then there are entire things that have nobody working on them. And nobody will work on them because they don't want to be alone. Or they figure if this were good, there'd be another team. And it's just terrible advice. And so I thought, okay, well, it will be a bad idea, but I want to know for myself why. And the internet was full of conventional wisdom about why supersonic jets couldn't exist. You're like, oh, people won't pay more for speed, and it's inherently more expensive, and you can't have a big enough market unless you can solve supersonic flight over land, which is technical and regulatory. And so decades of R&D is going to be required to solve all these things. And observe, those are all qualitative claims about quantitative questions. Like, supersonic flight costs more. Okay, why and how much more? People won't pay more for speed? Well, that doesn't seem right. Yeah. People pay more for direct flights than connecting flights all the time. Yeah. It's a question of how much. The market's not big enough without supersonic flight over land. Is it? How big is big enough? It's a measurable thing. And so I just started building spreadsheets.
I like this approach. Quantify everything.
Quantify everything. And don't accept other people's conclusions about quantitative questions. I've seen that over and over again, where there are these claims, and sometimes I still make the mistake of accepting them. And then I go build the spreadsheet model, and I find it's very surprising what the real truth is. So at any rate, I discovered that if you could build basically a single-digit efficiency improvement, like just a few percent better than Concorde, designed in the 1960s, you could build a supersonic seat with the economics of a business class flatbed.
And then once you had those calculations, you're like, I need to hire the best people?
Well, there was a little bit more. Like, that was a 3-line spreadsheet. And I was like, okay, it doesn't, on the face of it, it seems plausible. At that point, I bought every textbook I could find, and I started reading it. I did remedial calculus and physics because I hadn't had any since high school. And I started building a more detailed spreadsheet model of the airplane and a more detailed spreadsheet model of the market. And in the middle of 14, I kind of had it developed a bit, and I took it to a professor at Stanford, because these things are sometimes like assumptions in, conclusions out, but the quality of the answer is only as good as the quality of the assumption. And there were assumptions in there about like lift drag ratios, which is aerodynamic efficiency, specific fuel consumption, which is like how efficient an engine is, and like where could we get on a couple of those key parameters would impact whether the end product was practical or not. So I took it to a professor at Stanford who had done a bunch of supersonics research, and I'm like, dude, I have not, I've been at this for like 2 seconds. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, where R&D is at on these things now. Are any of these assumptions reasonable? And he said, Blake, if you're going to do this, you need to push your team way harder because all of these are conservative. And I remember like leaving his office in this like stupor in a way of like, wow, I don't know how it could be that I'm the human that like stumbled across the practicality of supersonic passenger flight when nobody else did. But either I have no courage or I'm going to go find some people and like see how far we can get this. That decision really did come down to just, it felt like a choice of courage.
How was it hiring people from major airline companies?
Yeah.
Without having the experience, right?
So people think that like the engineering of building a supersonic jet must be really hard. And, it is in a way, but it's like the third hardest thing at Boom. Like the third hardest thing at Boom is engineering. The next hardest thing is financing. And the actual hardest thing is team. And the reason team is so hard is that there has not been a startup in aviation for a century.
Oh,
Like
wow.
literally
Yeah.
the last new commercial airplane company was Douglas Aircraft, founded in 1921. So all the founders retired in the 1960s, which is a big part of why we don't have Supersonic already. And then, and so so then you've got the founders, and then the founders retire, and then you've got the people who work with the founders, and then those people retire, and then God help us, the accountants take over. And that's very much the story of Boeing. But like there's PayPal mafia, right? There's like Amazon mafia. There is no Boeing mafia. Like there are no entrepreneurial minded people who come out of these big companies. And so we had to like find people from bizarre other corners of the universe, or find people who had like gone to Boeing and were still earlier in their career, and we could like rescue them before they were destroyed.
Was it hard to persuade them?
Well, yes and no. Like when I would tell people I'm building a supersonic passenger jet, the first question was always, "Are you crazy?" And they didn't always say it out loud, but I could always tell. I could tell it was the real first question. And I could persuade them that the answer was maybe no. Then the second question is, how do I get involved and help? And I'm thinking of like the person we hired as our first like chief engineer, and we met. We sort of networked my way to him, like like the whole like 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon kind of a thing, and he and I like met in the subway outside SFO, and I'm like, hey dude, I want to show you my spreadsheet and like what I've figured out so far.
Oh wow.
And he's like, man, I'm used to seeing all these internet people who have crackpot airplane ideas, and he's like, this is not a crackpot airplane idea. And I had no idea you'd be this far. And he's like, this actually makes sense. And he's like, I want you to hire me as a consultant and I'll like consult with you. And I'm like, nope, that's not an option. It's full-time or nothing.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I don't want to do a full-time job. This will burn me out. And I'm like, okay. But he couldn't stop himself because he was like in love with the idea. And he comes back like the next week and he's like, I built a spreadsheet an order of magnitude like more sophisticated than what you built. Wow. And it gives the same answer.
Oh, that's awesome.
And like, it looks like this works.
So you had the first like actual industry confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it just started from there, right? I remember I read something that the industry was still like criticizing you and saying it's not viable.
Oh, they still are.
They still are.
Right.
How do you navigate this? This is one thing, general public says, oh, this is not possible. But when the industry experts are like, we've been there, we've done that.
Yeah. Industry experts don't know what they're talking about. Like the quote unquote experts are often just repeating the same conventional wisdom and haven't done any first principles analysis. And sometimes it gets fed by like the lore, like the big jet engine companies tell everybody that only the big jet engine companies can build jet engines because of course they do. Right. But then that gets repeated and like people accept it as if it's like physics, but it's not physics. Like SpaceX started from nothing and they put stuff in orbit. And by the way, they built their own rocket engines. And, and I was very inspired by that. I was like, wow, Elon was an internet guy and he put stuff in orbit. And like, that seems way harder than a supersonic jet. Actually, it's not. I think the supersonic jet's actually harder, but I didn't know that back then.
Would you agree with the phrase that's kind of related to this? Ignorance is my superpower. Is it true or not? Then?
I don't think that's actually true. Ignorance is definitely not good. I think the superpower is coming into a new domain and seeking out first principles. It's about actually getting rid of ignorance quickly and not by hoovering up opinions. Like the wrong way to come into a new domain is to go around and ask a bunch of people what they think.
Yeah.
A much better way to do it is to go into a new domain and like ask a bunch of people to teach you what they know. And so my favorite interview question at Boom was teach me something. It still is. By the way, I don't mind if everybody knows that because you can't fake your way through that interview question, even if you know it's coming.
Yeah.
Because you can't teach something unless you actually understand it.
Absolutely.
And so on one hand, this is a great filter for people who really understand. On the other hand, I learned a lot just interviewing people. And so my approach was not find out people's conclusions and like fit them all together into a picture, but rather like hoover up all that knowledge myself. So it was very much the opposite of ignorance is a superpower. I think like getting rid of ignorance quickly is a superpower.
But also believing that you can crack a problem that a lot of people tried to crack and then gave up on it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I actually had that belief. And like some days I still don't have that belief. A thing I believe is it is impossible to know one's own limits except by picking something incredibly motivating and going all in. Like, what can someone do or not do? How do you know on day one? Like, the SAT doesn't tell you.
Yeah.
Your grades in college don't tell you. Your friends don't tell you. The only way to find out is pick something you'll never give up on and see how far you can go.
I love that. What if you're later in your life? Like, because some people will tell like, oh, if you're talented, you should have had some wins already, right?
Yeah. I think it's irrelevant. My experience has been it's irrelevant. Like, I had some really big early wins, like, wow, I'm 24. I've got a P&L at Amazon. I got to work with Jeff, and then bam, 2 failed startups. So I could have been like, oh, I guess I'm not so good. Like, I guess I shouldn't try anything. And I don't know, like, it could have been true. Hell, could still be true. We could screw this Boom thing up, but we've gotten pretty far so far.
What was your hardest day building Boom?
It seems like we have like a near-death experience about once a year. Like, I'm thinking of last year. So last year we got down to 7 days of cash, and like the HR team and the legal team had like a plan to like file for bankruptcy, and that we'd been like on the verge of for like a long time. And like everyone was nervous. Like a bunch of people had quit over it. Like I had board members quit over it.
Oh, wow.
It was really obnoxious, actually. And it was like a filter for people who are really committed, is what it turned out to be. But like that was incredibly tough. And then we had to do like a down round and a recap to like get the company back together. And that was like one of the most painful things I've ever gone through.
Have you ever thought of giving up? Like, oh, it's not working?
I mean, there are all kinds of days where I'm looking at a problem and I feel like I'm staring down the barrel of a gun, and it's like, that could be the thing that kills us. And then the answer has always been like, don't give up. Like, I remember when we got down to like 3 weeks of cash, and I called Paul Graham, and I was like, dude, I need your advice. We've got 3 weeks of cash. I'm trying to figure out how to bridge our way to the next milestone. And he's like, aren't you shutting the company down? Usually when people call me and they say they've got 3 weeks of cash, they're telling me they're shutting the company down. And I said, no, I'm not giving up. We're finding our way through this. I don't know the way right now, but I'm absolutely not shutting the company down. I don't care if I have to take it through bankruptcy and restart it. I'm not giving up.
That's amazing. I think this is what really defines success for entrepreneurs.
Some people say like companies fail when they run out of money, and in a certain sense it's true, but I think they actually fail when the founder gives up. And so the whole like, I'm just, I will put myself through whatever quantity of hell it takes to succeed is really powerful.
Yeah.
I guess I could spend the rest of my life like foolishly failing, but I don't think that's what's going to happen.
That's awesome. And let's talk about what's going on right now. You just had your supersonic flight. Congratulations. The test flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on? How far are you from actually launching?
About 4 years from carrying passengers. Our goal is first passenger on board by the end of 2029. So it's not that far away. And to you just concretize where we are right now, we've built and flown the first ever supersonic jet outside of a government or military. Like I think I asked ChatGPT a few weeks ago, which governments have made supersonic jets? And ChatGPT is like, here are the 7 governments that have done it. But there's an 8th that's not a government. It's called Boom.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like, I love you, ChatGPT. But yeah, so it's the first supersonic jet outside of a government or military. It is the first civil supersonic jet made in America. It's the first one since Concorde. And it's the first one made out of airliner technology. So we basically took 20-year-old proven 787, Boeing 787 level technology, and we said, let's go build a supersonic jet that is safe enough to put a person on, that it can break the sound barrier, and learn 100% of what it takes to actually do that, technically, team, management-wise, and then we can take it and scale up. And so that's where we are now. We've broken the sound barrier. We've done it on 2 flights. We've broken the sound barrier 6 times. We did it all 6 times without any audible sonic boom. And now it's time to take all those lessons, scale it up, and build the airplane that you and I can fly on. And
also the legal ban, right?
Yeah. We have, so we actually started the company with the assumption, no new technology and no change in regulations. Because otherwise it would just be like way too much for a startup to take on. And so our assumption was that we would not solve the sonic boom problem. We wouldn't solve it technically, and we wouldn't solve it politically, at least not for version 1. But it turned out as we got down path, there was a technical solution. And it wasn't even that hard. Like the problem was described as way more difficult than it actually is. And now when I look at the administration we have today and how the political climate has shifted in the last 12 months, Like, I'm very confident that the supersonic ban over the continental U.S. is going to be lifted.
But then you will have to work with other governments as well, because you.
What's actually worse in the U.S. than it is elsewhere. U.S. and Canada have an outright supersonic ban. It doesn't exist everywhere. The rules are a little bit different in the rest of the world. And I think the reason is that Concorde was a European project, and there was an American competitor, which got canceled. And only after the American competitor was canceled, it was like, oh, we can't have this sonic stuff. So I think the actual, many times regulations have like a moral cover story.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we have to do this because sonic booms are bad, or this is to protect children, or whatever. But then the reality is it's to protect Boeing.
Yeah.
But no one wants to say that out loud.
Okay.
So they invent that, they just tell everybody booms are bad, and that's why we have to have the regulation. But it was a speed limit, like literally 14 CFR 91.817 says thou shalt not exceed Mach 1.
And that's can you
the speed of sound. Mach 1 is the speed of sound.
Okay.
It's a speed limit in the sky. And what it should say is thou shalt not make bad noises. It's real. I mean, it's a really, really stupid regulation. My suspicion is that the reason it's a speed limit, not a noise limit, because if it was a reasonable noise limit, a whole bunch of things would have passed.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll get that changed. And then we can fly coast to coast.
What are you hoping? How soon?
I don't know how to predict this, but
things are moving. Less than 4 years or more than 4 years, because you have.
Oh, I mean, it could be 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Like it's it could. We'll see, but it could happen very quickly.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers, toes, and eyes are crossed.
Awesome. I had another question about carbon emissions, because when I posted a story of your talk from that party, people were like, "But this is like 3x more carbon emissions than like a business class seat."
Yeah. So it's supersonic is more energy intensive, and we're designing around next generation sustainable aviation fuel, so that when enough of that is available, actually the carbon could potentially go all the way down to zero on synthetic fuel. But it is more energy intensive, and I think there's a big mindset question around this. Like, and it's one of the reasons why we haven't had supersonic already is in the 70s, humanity shifted from an abundance mindset to a conservation mindset. And there's this amazing chart, like up until about 1970, there was an exponential increase, like a Moore's law of energy. Like energy per human is going up rapidly. Standard of living is going up rapidly. All kinds of new technologies are possible because we have energy abundance, including, by the way, things that make climate livable, like air conditioners and heaters.
Yeah.
And then the mindset shifted and it got into a conservation mindset. The exponential curve flattened and became a linear, like a small slope linear growth curve. So I think it's very, very important that we like plan for and create an energy abundance future and then find a way to do it that works out writ large for humanity and for the planet. And we can do that. And by the way, if you look back at the history of energy, it shows it over and over again. At some point, somebody invented fire. Or discovered it.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, but fire has, it has the obvious pro, we don't freeze. And it has these cons, like it's actually not super healthy to bring in breathe the smoke, right? Oh, okay. So now we invent the log cabin and the pot-bellied stove, and we put the fire in the stove and there's a smokestack. And like, okay, that's much, much better. It's much healthier. It's much better for our environment. My point is every generation of technology has pros and cons. And as you go from generation to generation, you can increase the pros and decrease the cons. And that's the story of why like we're not in the cave anymore. And so I think that's where we have to go with energy and supersonic jets. And it's okay to use more energy. It's a good thing to use more energy. Let's figure out how to have more abundant, reliable, cheap energy, and let's minimize the downsides. And let's, if there's like too much carbon, great. Let's figure out how to synthesize jet fuel. Let's figure out how to synthesize it more affordably than you can pump it out of the ground. And there's good work happening on that. It's difficult to do, but it's progressing.
Yeah, so that gives me hope. What do you think would be the cost for the average person?
Yeah, so our ultimate goal is to make supersonic flight attainable for anybody. But there's a question of where do we start? And Concorde, marvelous technical accomplishment, but like we talk in the Valley about product market fit, and this is a great example of something that never had product market fit. There were 100 seats on the airplane. They're really uncomfortable. Like we have some Concorde seats in our office, you might think they came out of like the back of a Ryanair or Southwest jet. It was really small, and yet it's $20,000 a ticket. And so Concorde was for like rock stars and royalty. And especially with 70s, 80s.
And back in the day, $20,000 back in the day, that was...
Well, that's adjusted for inflation, but it's still a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like who wants to pay $20,000 to go somewhere really fast? Well, it's not nobody, but it's rock stars and royalty.
Exactly.
And it only kind of works on a couple of routes because you can't fill 100 seats.
Yeah.
And so with that was kind of no man's land. And then Overture 1 is like the Model S of supersonic jets. It's not for everybody, but it's for a whole lot of people. And so the fares will be like business class. So I think like $5,000 round trip would be a typical fare.
It's going to be a nice seat.
Be a nice seat.
Lie flat.
Well, not lie flat.
Oh, no.
Because that was the whole unlock. You don't need a lie flat bed for a 3 or 4 hour flight.
So it's going to be 3 to 4 hours from New York to London, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fascinating.
But also just not just New York to London, Miami, Madrid, and Seattle to Tokyo, and DC to Paris.
That's in 4 years,
right?
or this is like a...
They will all be possible in about 4 years. And now we won't have enough of the jets yet because we'll be like starting production.
Yeah.
The whole boom skeptic thing is going to be like, oh, they can't build a supersonic jet. Oops, they did. Then it's going to be they can't build a jet engine. And then it's going to be like, oops, they did. And it'll be they can't certify an airliner. Then it'll be like, oops, they did. And then it'll be they can't make enough of them. Like, oops, they did.
It gives me so much energy just hearing you say that, and I see how excited you are. That's awesome because we fly so much. And that would be a game changer for the travel industry. Awesome. So,
but actually, I'd love to riff on that with you. Like, it's not just about making it faster. The thing a lot of people don't appreciate about speed is not just like, oh, how efficient are we with our time? Speed is often the difference between doing something and not doing something, between something happening and not happening. So, for example, before the speed of the jet, basically nobody went to Hawaii. Took too darn long. Like literally tourism to Hawaii pre-jet was like tens of thousands of people per year.
Yeah, because it was like a 10-hour flight or something.
It was like 16 from
16.
16 from San Francisco on a flying boat, and then just kind of cut that in half. Or like Nike got their start when Phil Knight fell in love with Japanese style running shoes on a chance trip to Japan after business school in the 1960s. Couldn't have done it 10 years earlier. Japan was way too difficult to get to, and you wouldn't take like a random vacation to Japan without a jet. And so like the shoes that we wear are a result of the speed of the jet. And I think that is, and it's whether we're talking travel speeds or like speed of iteration and development, or like speed of a supply chain, like the speed is very, very important. And like latency is fundamentally evil. And it's not just efficiency. It's a binary thing of do you do something or not?
Yeah.
And so I think speeding up travel, imagine a future in which our kids have friends that they actually know and have met from other continents.
And they can visit them for a weekend.
And they can visit them for a weekend, right? Like they know each other in person, not just like, I watched a video about them.
Yeah.
Like that is a very different future for humanity. And we can create that future if flights are faster and they're affordable and they're convenient and they're safe.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So let's talk about your day today. How many kids do you have?
4.
4,
yeah.
And you're still able to take them on flights. I saw your pictures, you're flying together.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I live a very full life.
How do you balance that? Like,
with great effort.
Yeah.
I try to really be present when I'm with the kids, and like whenever I can find a way to kind of check 2 boxes at the same time. Like as an example, I took my older 3 on a vacation a couple of years ago that was like a road trip in the sky. And because I love flying little airplanes, it's like my one hobby.
You fly yourself.
Yeah. And so we like did 4 cities in 7 days, and it was like, guys, we can't do that on United, and now they're like, Dad, when do we get to go on like Air Dad?
Nice. How many hours a week do you work?
Oh, I have no idea.
Do you have days off or?
I haven't had a day off since like, I don't know, 4 months or something.
How do you feel?
A little tired.
Passion keeps you going?
Passion keeps me going. Yeah. I mean, like 2024 for me was like terrible busy because it was like survival mode for the company. And like 2025, we got out of that. We raised $150 million from like some of the most amazing investors: Paul Graham, Sam Altman, Y Combinator, Bessemer, Michael Moritz, Reid Hoffman. Like all of those people put in at least $10 million in our like late 2024 financing. And so now we've got runway, and then we broke the sound barrier, and then we broke it again, and then we like did it boomless, and then it feels like we broke the internet, and people got really excited.
Yeah. And
it was 24 hours from breaking the sound barrier to being in the West Wing of the White House. And now it's like, holy crap, the world feels like it just cracked open for us, and there is opportunity, and we have to take advantage of it quickly enough.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the same point I was making about speed is the difference between things happening or not happening. The world is very open to supersonic right now. And, I think that like regulation change, it's either going to happen quickly or it's not going to happen. And so like, I
So
feel
you gotta move fast.
we got to move fast.
Yeah. I have a question, by the way. Speaking of the White House,
Yes.
can you talk about this photo, how it happened?
Yeah. So I like to say, no lobbyists were harmed in the creation of that photo. So it was Monday, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago Monday, we broke the sound barrier. We did it boomless. We announced boomless. And I was like in the Mojave Desert, and I'm like tweeting about we got to repeal this silly regulation. And like Elon responds like, yes, this administration will fix it. I was on a flight, a terrible, terrible flight, a pink eye flight to DC that night, which we should totally speed up. And we're planning to go like lobby the next day. And like by the time I landed in DC, I had an invitation to visit the White House.
Wow.
And so we had that first meeting, and we're starting to build support in the White House for it. It wasn't with the president. And then the next day I'm on the Hill, and we're sort of rapidly discovering there's bipartisan support for repealing the speed limit. Like everybody agrees that we shouldn't have a speed limit, that we should have a noise limit instead.
Yeah.
And then Thursday, I had coffee with the Secretary of Energy, who I met because so our landlord at Boom is friends with him. And so it was like me to our landlord to the Secretary of Energy.
Landlord meaning owns the
building that Boom is in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so like he and I had a great conversation. He's like, I love this. I think the president will love it. He's like, you should make a model of the airplane. And I was like, well, I actually have one in my hotel room.
Convenient.
I'm like, do you have 5 minutes? Like,
Uh-huh.
I'll sprint and get it and bring it back.
Uh-huh.
And but the question is, how do we get it to the president?
Uh-huh.
And he's like, well, I'm seeing him later today. I'll give it to him. I was like, okay, how did this happen so quickly? But no, I'm incredibly, that whole just getting people like the magic of Boom is everybody wants supersonic flight to exist, and if we can show them that we're not crazy, then they want to help. And so like a lot of people have helped.
Can you give advice to someone who's stuck with their idea of building a boom-sized company, but they just can't take the leap of faith? They have a family. They're like, I haven't had proven success yet.
Yeah. My experience has been is failure is never as bad as I think it's going to be. And like, there's a little bit of, like when I could get comfortable with the idea of failing, it was much easier to try. So like my first company, we were building a barcode scanning game, which is like the least inspiring thing anybody could ever choose to do. And I was doing it because I thought I knew e-commerce from Amazon and mobile from this other startup. So I thought I should work on mobile e-commerce because that's what I'm qualified to do. So I ended up building this mobile e-commerce thing that I don't care about at all. And and yet it's hard because like every startup is hard and every startup could fail. And I would get up in the morning and think like, ugh, I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to lose all the investors' money. No one's ever going to want to hire me again. And then effectively the company did fail. Like we acqui-hired it to Groupon and they shut the product down and put us on other stuff. And yet like failure in that case was the best paying job I'd ever had. A lot less stress than I'd had as a startup founder. A couple years where I could like reflect on what I'd learned and think about what I wanted to do next. And there were and mostly people respected me for trying. And so this notion I'd had in my head of failure would be like the end of my career really wasn't true. And so I think I learned to be a little bit less afraid of failure.
Yeah. So basically visualize the failure, what it looks like.
And just accept it.
And just go all in.
And then move on from it. And like a thing I tell the Boom team is, look, there is no guarantee we're going to succeed. We could totally fail. If we fail, just make sure we fail honestly. Don't fail like Theranos. Don't fail by like being a jerk or being bad. Like fail by giving it everything we have and then somehow it didn't work. But also don't give up. Don't fail.
Yeah.
Like, when XB1 broke the sound barrier, I sat down with a team and I was like, look at the airplane. Why is this here? It's here because all of us didn't give up when it would have been very reasonable to give up. Like, in fact, some people gave up along the way, but those of us standing here today didn't give up. And that's why it's here. Yeah. Don't give up.
Yeah. What would you say to this small guy right here? Any advice for him? Just words of encouragement.
Like, talk to your grandpa more.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't live to get to know his great grandkids really. and he'd fought in the Pacific Theater in World War II. He'd actually repaired propellers. And I think back about like all the conversations I could have had with him that I didn't have, and now
You
that I can't
inherited
have.
that, right? The love for aviation.
Yeah, I didn't even realize I got it from him. I don't know if I did get it from him. I wish I'd talked to him way more.
That's a great thing to say. Thank you. Thank you so much, Blake. You're amazing. A lot of inspiration. There's so many takeaways for everyone who's watching.
Well, thank you for the fun conversation and the chance to just like, I don't know, tell the real story.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully in 4 years, we're all flying supersonic.
Fingers, toes, and eyes are crossed.
Fingers crossed.